Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aedric Edward Hutapea Zhang, and I'm going to tell you a story. This is Hephaestus, the Greek god of fire and craftsmanship. Yet he was thrown out of Olympus as an infant by his mother because he was deformed. Yet he refused to die, and he spent his time on the ground, refining his craft until he created weapons and machines so beautiful that the gods were forced to welcome him back. Many times in life, we overlook things. Sometimes it's our friends who stay quiet in the corner. Sometimes it's a major that nobody wants to study. And sometimes it's waste. This is rice husk. It is the result of separating the inner rice grain from the outer hard shell, also known as hulling. It has almost no nutritional value and is thought to have zero applications whatsoever. But it represents 20% of all the rice that we eat in our daily lives. But how much rice husk are we talking about exactly? You know what? Let me reframe that question. How much rice husk is produced in Indonesia annually? The answer is to 10 to 20 million tons of rice husk annually, which is about 10 to 20% of the world's total rice husk production. That's equivalent to 50 to 100 times the Pyramid of Giza by volume. Okay, look, for the Americans in here, let's measure it using a football field. If we try to put that much rice husk onto a football field, first of all, from where you're standing, it's going to look sort of like that. And if you zoom back a little bit, you'll notice that it reaches the stratosphere at a minimum, and at a maximum, it's going to be double that amount. Now you may ask, Aedric, aren't rice husks super light? Of course the volume is going to be bigger than the mass. Guys, in terms of mass, the annual production of rice husks in Indonesia alone is equivalent to 1,000 Eiffel Towers. Now why is this a problem? Despite being an organic substance, the chemical composition of rice husk, being primarily composed of cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin, actually make it extremely hard to decompose and even harder to digest, even through the powerful stomachs of cattle. So what do farmers do with it? They burn it. In fact, 70 to 80% of rice husks are disposed of through burning. That's equivalent to 7 to 16 million tons of rice husk burned annually alone in Indonesia, which is equivalent to 10.5 to 24 million tons of CO2 per year. Now, I'm sure the burning question within all of you is, what on earth do we do about it? Well, about 10 months ago, I went to Kediri, which is a small city 2 hours away from Surabaya, also known as the seat of the 8th century Majapahit Empire. Originally, I had the opportunity to do an internship for genomics, but it quickly turned into an environmental engineering one. One of the projects that stuck with me the most was a project where we had the opportunity to turn rice husks into something useful. But what exactly did we do? Well, first, we burnt it in a controlled oven furnace to get this ash. Then we added sodium hydroxide. We stirred it and heated it at 100 degrees Celsius. We added hydrochloric acid to neutralize it, and it precipitated into this gel. And once we dried it and crushed it, what did we get? We got silica. It looks pretty unassuming, right? What is so good about this white powder that we would go through this much effort just to get it? Well, let me tell you, silica actually has a plethora of applications. It has applications in agriculture, in carbon reduction, in improving the standards of living in rural areas, and even in modern technology. Let's dive into the first application, which is an antifungal spray. More specifically, a silica spray solution for rice and maize crops. During my internship, one of the rooms was a room full of Petri dishes that contained different species of bacteria and fungi. A room which I like to call the mushroom. Man, tough crowd. Anyways, this particular species here is called Fusarium verticillioides, which is native to the region and known for ravaging crops. What makes this fungus so dangerous is that it can take over your entire crop in a very short amount of time. If you're a farmer and you see this on one of your plants, that's your whole harvest gone in a very short amount of time. So what do we do about it? And more importantly, how can we use rice husks to solve this problem? We can actually use the silica and just add distilled water to it to make a solution where we can spray it onto the plants. The silica strengthens the cell walls of the plants, not only preventing diseased plants from affecting others, but also protecting healthy plants from being affected by the fungus. Now that's great and all, but if you're like me, you'll eventually think, what else could we do with this technology? Well, a few months later, I assembled a team, and we created RIA, also known as the Rice Husk Emissions Adsorbent System. What it does is that it takes advantage of one of rice husk silica's most advantageous qualities, which is its higher surface area. Because rice husk silica is so much more porous than quartz silica, which is the crystal silica you see on the right, it actually does something far more efficiently, which is amine functionalization, the attaching of amine groups onto the surface of nanosilica particles, which allow it to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And because it has such a higher surface area, it does this so much more efficiently than quartz silica can. So what me and my team did is we joined a competition called the Conrad Innovation Challenge. And we designed a carbon filtration system for car exhausts, more specifically for taxi fleets in Jakarta. What this contains is a hexagonal lattice structure that contains metal organic frameworks that not only preserve the high surface area of the silica, but also maintain its structural integrity. And as the judges said, we have successfully turned a disposal problem, husks, into a climate solution, capture, which is the definition of deep tech innovation. But what's next? What else can we do? We can make a water filter, or more specifically, a high porosity slow sand filter. The official Indonesian statistics body, or BPS, states that about 8% of Indonesian households live in general slum housing, but half of them live next to unowned riverbank plots. What do we do to solve this problem? These unowned riverbank plots have trash thrown in them almost every single day. What we do is that we give them a simple but scalable and low-cost water filter that is accessible in order to give them access to clean water for their daily needs. And because of the higher surface area of the rice husk ash silica, it can actually absorb more particles from the water. And because it actually has metal impurities, it can actually hold onto heavy metals that are dangerous to drink, making sure that the resulting water is clean, safe to drink, and safe to use for their everyday needs. I'm actually replicating this process in my school for my extended essay, and what I'm planning to do is create a prototype that I'll be able to test to make sure that the resultant water becomes clean. But wait, there's more. I'm not going to go into so much detail about these, but the point is that rice husk ash silica can be used for so many different things. It can be used for semiconductors, for solar panels. It can be used as fertilizer from the carbon ash waste from its production. And it can even be used as nanoparticles for drug delivery, right? Protecting fragile drugs entering your bloodstream. Before we finish, I'd like to go back to Hephaestus. Like Hephaestus, Rice husks are frail and often overlooked, but because of their innate value, they have the potential to protect and to influence and to benefit so many lives and the environment around us. In life, there are so many things that we overlook. Yet, all of these things have their own innate value. We just need to look a bit further. I'd like to finish us off with a quote by Thomas Alva Edison. To invent, you only need two things: a good imagination and a pile of junk. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.